What does it mean to betray? To step outside the lines we've drawn for ourselves, or that others have drawn for us. Is betrayal simply an act of deception, or could it be something more? A reckoning with the soul, an unsettling yet necessary confrontation with our deepest selves? When we speak of infidelity, we often limit the conversation to moral condemnation, to the breaking of trust, to the pain it causes. But what if, as Esther Perel suggests in The State of Affairs, rethinking infidelity is a question, not just an answer. A question that compels us to look deeper, not just at the relationship, but at ourselves, at our longings, at the unspoken truths we carry. Perel invites us to a daring re-examination of love and fidelity, two of the most sacred constructs in our lives. We tend to view infidelity as a failure, a breach in the structure of the relationship. But what if it's also an invitation? An invitation to explore the gaps, the unfulfilled desires, the silences that we might not even know exist within us. How often do we truly pause and ask, who am I within this relationship? Who am I without it? Who am I becoming, and is it someone I recognize or someone I no longer know? These questions may be unsettling, but they are also vital. They force us to look beyond the surface, beyond the betrayal itself, to the deeper currents at play in our emotional and spiritual lives. The complexity of infidelity lies not just in the act itself, but in the human emotions and desires that swirl around it, desires that are often hidden, even from ourselves. Perel writes about how an affair can act as a mirror, reflecting not just the flaws of a relationship, but also the unmet needs within the individual. We often imagine that infidelity arises from a lack of love, but paradoxically, some of the most devoted partners are the ones who stray. Why? Because sometimes, in our search for connection with another, we are really searching for a lost part of ourselves. A part we've neglected, suppressed, or perhaps even forgotten altogether. Let's sit with that for a moment. What parts of ourselves have we abandoned in the name of love, of duty, of responsibility? Are there desires we've suppressed, emotions we've buried, because they seem too inconvenient, too disruptive? And what happens when those parts of us finally demand to be heard? When the inner self, once quiet and compliant, rises up and asks for space, for recognition, for the freedom to express itself fully. Is it betrayal to listen to that voice, or is it a form of honesty, perhaps even a deeper loyalty to oneself? These are not easy questions, but they are the kinds of questions that, when explored, can lead to profound self-awareness and transformation. Perel shares the stories of individuals and couples who, after experiencing infidelity, found not the end of love, but the beginning of a new, more honest connection. These are not stories of easy forgiveness or instant reconciliation. Rather, they are stories of struggle, of confronting uncomfortable truths about desire, longing, and the limitations of what we think love should be. Infidelity, in these instances, becomes not the breaking point, but a breaking open, a cracking of the surface to reveal what lies beneath. It's a spiritual inquiry as much as a relational one, asking us to reconsider what it means to truly know another, and perhaps even more crucially, what it means to truly know ourselves. Perel speaks of longing as one of the most fundamental human experiences. In the space between what we have and what we want, between who we are and who we wish to be, longing thrives. This longing is not inherently negative. It is a sign of life, of desire, of the eternal movement of the self towards something more. Yet, in the context of relationships, we often fear longing. We equate it with dissatisfaction, with restlessness, with failure. But what if longing is not a symptom of something broken, but rather a signal of our inner self reaching for growth? What if, instead of trying to quench our longing, we leaned into it, allowing it to guide us toward deeper self-discovery? Perhaps infidelity, as painful as it may be, is an expression of that longing, not just for another person, but for another version of ourselves. A version we may have left behind in the pursuit of security, stability, or love. What would it mean to live a life where we were fully attuned to those desires, where we allowed ourselves the space to evolve within our relationships, rather than feeling confined by them? How might we honor the dynamic nature of love and connection, rather than clinging to a static ideal of what they should be? This leads us to a deeper reflection. What is the nature of love itself? Is love a contract, something bound by rules and promises? Or is it a living, breathing entity, something that must be constantly nurtured, questioned, and reimagined? Perel invites us to think of love not as a static state, but as a dynamic process. A dance between connection and autonomy, between closeness and distance. And perhaps it is within this dance that we find the true essence of fidelity, not in adherence to an ideal, but in the ongoing commitment to growth, both as individuals and as partners. But what if, in our desire to be loyal, we have also betrayed ourselves? Perel asks us to consider the ways in which we remain faithful out of fear. Fear of losing security, fear of the unknown, fear of loneliness. And yet, in that very fidelity, we might lose something far more precious: the integrity of our own soul's path. It's a difficult question, one that asks us to confront our deepest fears. What is worse, the betrayal of another or the betrayal of oneself? This is not just a book about infidelity. It's a book about human nature, about the ways we seek connection, the ways we wrestle with our desires, and the ways we grow through discomfort. It's a mirror held up to the complexities of love, of commitment, and of the human heart. And it offers us something rare, a chance to look at betrayal, not just as an act of harm, but as a portal to self-discovery. It asks us to confront the ways we've been living and to consider whether those ways are truly in alignment with who we are and who we are becoming. In one powerful passage, Perel writes, "We often turn to others to give us what we cannot give ourselves." This insight touches on a universal truth. How many times have we placed the burden of our happiness, our fulfillment, our sense of worth on another person? How many times have we expected someone else to fill the voids within us, only to find that no one can? And when that inevitable disappointment arises, do we blame them or do we look inward? What might happen if, instead of seeking external validation, we turned inward, cultivating the kind of self-love and self-acceptance that allows us to show up in our relationships from a place of wholeness rather than need? The challenge Perel presents is both intellectual and spiritual. It is a call to examine not just our relationships with others, but our relationship with ourselves. To what extent are we truly living in alignment with our deeper desires, our spiritual longings? And how can we navigate the tension between our need for connection and our need for autonomy? These are not easy questions, but they are the kinds of questions that, when explored, can lead to profound self-awareness and transformation. As we come to a close, I invite you to consider your own life, not in terms of betrayal or fidelity, but in terms of authenticity. Where in your life are you living out of alignment with your true self? What unspoken desires or longings are you carrying within you? And how might you honor them without causing harm? It is here, in this inquiry, that the heart of Perel's work lies. Not in the drama of infidelity, but in the quiet, often painful journey of discovering who we are and who we are becoming. This is the true gift of the state of affairs. It offers us a way to look beyond the surface, to dive into the depths of the human experience, and to emerge with a clearer sense of who we are and how we wish to live. So as you reflect on these questions, take a moment to sit with the discomfort, with the complexity. And remember, the search for truth, whether in love, in life, or within ourselves, is a path we walk with both courage and compassion. And as always, keep books over mind.